we doing in the 70s? We were protesting, we were asserting our rights and our needs. And when that happens, conservative folks and people who really like the system of gender, they push back.
Content warnings for this episode include discussion of gender-based harms and white supremacy. Genderful would like to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples and unceded lands that the producers, hosts, and guests have lived and dwelt upon. Today, we honor the Mohawk, Algonquin, and Anishinabewaki.
And the Muscogee.
We honor the elders, the human, plant, and animal ancestors of these lands, and celebrate the living descendants of these peoples. May all beings tend these lands for the goodness of the next 7 generations and beyond.
Miati folks, welcome to Genderful, a talk show interviewing gender diverse folks about their special interests.
The name of our show celebrates that gender expansiveness is wonderful.
Hi, I'm Gender Master, and my pronouns are they, them.
Hi, I'm Atlas of Phoenix, and my pronouns are also they, them. The focus of our show is to interview trans, non-binary, agender, and gender-diverse people regarding their special interests, passion projects, and resources for the gender-diverse community.
We want our audience to know that this show is hosted by 2 folks who also identify as non-binary, transmasculine, neurodivergent, and disabled, with the passion for telling trans stories.
We invite you to remember that we are whole people with robust lives, friendships, challenges, and successes. We love and are loved, and we are delighted to share these stories with you.
As always, we kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of their identities. Your identities can change over time and are valid every step of the way. And if you think you're gender diverse, you are gender diverse. There are no social or medical prerequisites to be included in the community.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Genderful. I'm your host today. My name is Miranda, also known as Nassattack. This week we have Khye Tyson. We'll be talking about the systems of gender. I'm very much looking forward to that. I've actually never taken a gender studies course in university because, back then, cishet male, it's like, oh, I don't need to take gender studies. That's not a course that appeals to me. Oh boy, how the tables have turned.
Life comes at you
Now
fast.
I'm very interested in such things. Welcome to Genderful episode 95. We're coming up on the big 100s. We have a very special guest lined up for 100. We have a slightly less special guest lined up for episode 99, but we'll get there. This week, our guest is Khye Tyson, they, them pronouns, and is chatting with us about the system of gender and how we can critically examine it. I believe one of our producers found them on Instagram. Maybe we can talk more about that later. I am not an Instagram enjoyer, so I know nothing about Instagram. It's just like, oh, this is where people post their pictures these days. This is what the kids are doing. So welcome to Genderful, Khye. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation. And we can talk about Instagram. I'm not an Instagram enjoyer either. But that's a whole conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it depends where the Twitter crowd ends up. If they all end up on Threads, then I may have to get an Instagram account. I don't actually know how that works.
I don't either, but I don't trust it because it's Meta. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, neither do I, but I also never trusted Twitter. So whatever, I'm going to go wherever the crowd goes. I'm a sheep, I'm a follower. That's just how things are.
That's a solid point. I don't trust any of these people. This isn't new information.
Yeah.
So regardless,
exactly.
They're all stealing my data.
I mean, I'm just waiting for, I'm waiting for the house to burn down and for the storm to blow the ashes in one pile. So
Fair.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into the questions. So then we have a couple questions that we like to ask all of our guests. So first one is, what might be the things you can trace back to your youth that indicated you might be gender diverse one day?
I have a couple cute stories. So
I love cute stories.
Cute now. They were not cute then, but so I don't know, cute with a grain of salt. So I have an older brother who is 3 years older than me. And we would play outside a lot at like my grandparents' house and at home in different places. And so one time we were outside in the backyard at my grandparents' house, and my brother had to use the bathroom. And so he peed on a tree. And I decided I would try to pee on the tree also.
Um,
And like I was maybe 3 years old. And like, so I was like, the fact that remember this is kind of impressive. But yeah, like I was 3 years old. I was like barely potty trained, but I was like, maybe I'm a boy. Like that was always kind of in the back of my head. Like maybe I'm a boy. Like what? And I asked my mom one time if I was a boy. I think I was like 3 or 4 years old, and I was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" It just
mm,
didn't. It just didn't. I was like, I don't. I don't think I'm a girl. I don't know. Um, and so yeah, I definitely had some, and I also had some crushes on different girls, like the Little Mermaid and the Pink Power Ranger. And
mm,
so I was definitely queer. I was definitely like, I don't know, I would do, quote unquote boy things just as much as I did girl things. And I didn't like all the restrictions put on girls, and you have to dress a certain way and all that kind of stuff. But I like certain things. Like I liked Barbie dolls, and I liked playing house and different things like that. So I didn't necessarily hate all things feminine, but I hated I guess the expectations that came along with it. Of course, I didn't have the language for it back then, but I was just like, anytime I had to put on like one of those big frilly dresses with like the ruffly socks, I like had it was like a whole dramatic thing.
uh,
Um, and so, yeah, looking back, it's like I was very much trying to communicate, who I was and what I felt comfortable doing. And most of the time it wasn't listened to, but I definitely had some moments.
no, that's awesome. You said you had a second story, or was that the whole one?
That was basically,
Yeah.
I mean, I have some other stories that those are the best ones.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's really interesting because like most gender diverse people can identify these sorts of feelings at a very young age. So this is not like, oh, like you suddenly become trans at the age of 35. It's like, no, it's like
No.
it's always been there. It's just a question, like it takes some of us longer to figure it out than others. But
Yep.
it's like one of those things that in hindsight, it's like, oh yeah, no, that all makes sense now. This is not
Yeah.
something that people do. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
now, how would you say your relationship to gender has evolved over time?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think I started to identify as non-binary maybe when I was like 24, 25. And before that, I didn't have really the language for it. Um, I didn't really have anything to go off of, I guess, other than just how I felt. And so the ways that I would carry myself, or the hairstyles that I like to wear, different things like that, like um, that's how I would express my gender, or different activities that I would do that are gendered for no reason. Um, and so yeah, I didn't have a lot of control over like I guess my image, or how I presented myself. I didn't have much control over um really anything. My parents were like super overprotective, but I think as a kid I was very introspective. I was undiagnosed neurodivergent, and
Mm,
I was like always thinking about a lot of existential stuff, and a lot of things about like, who am I, and like why am I here, and those types of questions. And so I think I wasn't really analyzing my gender though. I was just kind of like, I was, I guess, like not like other girls. If I had to put a label on it, like, oh, I don't care
uh,
about makeup. I don't care about this and that, and I don't know. But yeah, just very like, I'm gonna distance myself from people who enjoy femininity, or people who enjoy um, certain types of activities or whatever. But then really, I was I wish that I could do it right. Like I wish that I could be the type of girl that people wanted me to be. Like I didn't
mm,
necessarily enjoy it, but I wish that I could basically fit in with everyone else, not because I actually wanted to do makeup, but because I thought that well, maybe if I do these certain things, then I'll receive the
Mm,
validation or the love or whatever that I desired. Um, but yeah, as an adult, I was in grad school and we had to do an assignment basically in one of my classes that was like, what choose like an identity that you have. And this was like a multicultural identity theory type class. My background is in education, so it was very nerdy. But they were like, pick an identity that you have and like do something, act out life as someone who is in a more marginalized position in that identity group. So like for example, one of my friends who's Muslim, she decided to wear hijab for a day or two in certain locations and record what happened. And so me at this point, I had identified as queer, but I was still very much cisgender and didn't know too much else about um, gender or anything. And so I decided to dress mask for a couple of days and see what happened. And I mean, I guess the outfit was bad looking back. Like it probably didn't fit and it was not cute, but like I felt just a little nugget of gender euphoria. And I was like, oh, I didn't expect to feel that. Okay. So, that was kind of my first time playing around with gender with appearance. And I've always really liked fashion and I'm interested in fashion. I don't necessarily always um, keep up with with all the trends, but just like I'm interested in how you can express yourself through your outfits and through your looks and different things. And so yeah, that was my first time really experimenting with my gender through fashion. And I've been just playing around with a lot of things ever since. And I think I had to come to a point where I reconciled my feminine side because as an AFAB person, it's really easy to like demonize the feminine because I'm trying to distance myself from it. But I had to come to a point where it was like, no, I like some of these things and I want to be able to wear a dress or whatever without feeling like I have to justify being a non-binary
right.
person in a dress or justify, showing up in a certain way. Like, yeah, I can
Yeah.
wear a dress today and I can wear a bow tie tomorrow and I can wear
Yeah.
both.
Doing it because you want to, not because it's expected of you, right?
Exactly. And like it's still very queer. Like I could put on, I could have the most hyper femme presentation and it still would be very queer because I'm very queer. And so
Yeah.
um, just I had to come to a point where it's like it doesn't matter if I'm mask or femme or somewhere in between or both or neither, that, I'm still my identity is still valid and, I can show up however I want that day because I don't feel less of myself if I'm wearing a dress unless it's like against my will. Then,
Yeah.
then I'm not going to feel good. But if it's something I feel good in, then I feel good in it. And so yeah, I'm at a place now where I'm going with the flow of what my current guess how my inner self wants to be portrayed outwardly of like sometimes it's
Mm,
him and sometimes it's um like a box. Like I don't know, sometimes it's just like I don't even want to think about gender when I put on clothes. I want to just put on something that makes me feel good and
yeah.
um just know
There's no
that
rule that says you have to stick to one specific presentation. Like you're allowed to be as fluid
yeah,
as you want to be, right? That's perfectly valid.
yeah. And that femme is an identity I I embrace and that I take on politically, knowing that there's so much femphobia in the world that femmes, regardless of their, gender assigned at birth or sex assigned at birth, are a lot of times the most vulnerable. And that being femme, that there's nothing shameful in that, that there's nothing inherently bad about being femme,
Mhm.
and that I'm very femme for femme. Like I'm very much like, what do my femmes need? Like I'm here for y'all. Like I'm here for us. So yeah, just like always reminding people that femmes are enough and that femmes don't have to prove that they're, that they're smart or that they're serious or whatever, just because they like to wear heels or makeup or wigs or whatever and pink, and like that has nothing to do with their abilities, and like just the assumptions that people make about femmes who enjoy being femme. Yeah, that's one
Mhm.
of my soapboxes. Like, I'm pro femme times 1,000.
Awesome. I love that so much. And it's yeah, it's pretty much every single person I talk to has some sort of experience with how powerful it is with clothing and how that's like presenting in a different way can really be a profound experience. And it's something that until you experience it for yourself, you don't realize how profound it is. I mean, pretty much everyone that's come on the show has told a similar story. I mean, I have a similar story myself, when I first started presenting femmes. So but yeah, the clothing is a huge deal. And I wanted to go back to something you said earlier about like not having the language for being non-binary. And I think that's another thing I like to talk about quite a lot is some of us growing up, particularly folks in my generation or earlier generations, that didn't have the language for being transgender or being non-binary or just being queer. So when you don't have the language to describe the thing, that concept or idea like doesn't exist to you. So it's until you learn the language to describe that concept, then those things are beyond your reach. So that I think that's why it's really important that we get as much information out there as possible, and we fight back against the kind of suppression of information.
Yeah, absolutely. And like
Mhm.
having a name or a label for something means like community. It means that there are other people that you can find, that you can relate to and connect with. And I think like that's the beauty of the internet. One of the few beautiful things about the internet, that we can build communities with the most niche of identities or experiences, and that we can find
Mhm.
similarities between ourselves and other people who we would never have connected with in the past. Like, I'm a millennial, so like I feel like I was there in real time with like all these identities developing on Tumblr, and like having a name for it and having a
Oh
word to
yeah.
be able to connect with each other. Like, it's really powerful because so many of us were isolated before that.
Mhm.
So many generations previously were isolated, and that isolation can be
Mhm.
really harmful, especially to queer youth. So yeah, yeah, like having a label it's like a opening a door.
Yeah. No, it's I mean, I was never on Tumblr, but I have heard that a lot of eggs got cracked on Tumblr. Good friend of mine cracked her egg there.
Yeah, for
YouTube
sure.
YouTube did it for me. So
Oh, the
just having a
YouTube.
community on YouTube, that was very helpful to me in my early transition.
Yeah, the YouTube transition kids, like that first wave of folks who were like in real time, like, I'm going on hormones, I'm getting surgery. Like, that was groundbreaking. Like, that
Oh
was
my God, yes.
honestly, they were the
Yeah.
first YouTubers. The trans kids. Yeah.
Like honestly, just hearing other people's stories and seeing yourself in them, that's like to me, that was like the number one thing.
Yeah.
Um, so, but we're going to go ahead and segue into our main special topic that we're talking about today, which is the system of gender. So what we just say the difference is between individual gender identity or presentation of roles and the system of gender itself.
So I like to explain it like, usually when I'm explaining the system of gender, it's to like cis het Black women. And so I'm finding ways to, because one of the first questions that people ask is like, but I like lipstick, I like wearing heels, I like dresses. Do I have to give
Mhm.
that up? And no, I tell people you don't have to give it up. It's not about you like to wear lipstick. It's about there's a multi-billion-dollar industry that has been created to prey on your insecurities based
Mm,
off of your gender assigned at birth. It's,
mhm,
like, makeup is great. Heels are great, dresses are great, all those things are great. If you feel wonderful in it, please wear it. But like the system of gender is this entire system that has been created that's artificial, um, and with the purpose of upholding capitalism. And it's kind of, I know sometimes I probably sound like I have like a tinfoil hat, but like basically, when you're looking at the system of capitalism, and when I'm talking about capitalism, I'm including white supremacy, I'm including
Yep.
patriarchy, I'm including all these things because they all have the same root. And so one of the biggest things that perpetuates capitalism is the nuclear family. Have the idea that you get married, you have a 1 or 2 income household, and you have your kids, and you're very independent. Um, the opposite of the nuclear family is living in a community. Oops, I hit my
Mhm.
microphone, sorry. But living in a community where you're able to support each other, where you can have more than 1 or 2 incomes, that you can pool your resources, that everyone doesn't have to work full time. Ideally, everyone doesn't have to work full time because there's enough people to cover everyone's needs. That
Yeah.
we can split what we need, and we can support each other. So this nuclear family, what really is the heart of the nuclear family is the role of the wife and the mother, because without the wife and the mother, the house is not being upkept, the children are not being raised, the man's needs are not being handled so that he can go off and work. And so really at the root of, maybe not the root of the creation of capitalism, or maybe it is, but definitely at the root of the continuance of it, is very strict gender roles. This idea that women are caretakers and nurturers and providers, and that they're naturally so. If you choose to be a caretaker, that's great. If you choose to, work outside the house, that's great. But if it's your
Mhm.
actual choice and not something that you've been guided into wanting to do, by everything in society, from parents to teachers to the law to educational institutions, or the ways that different workplaces are set up. So it's, the system is that it's in every piece of life in society. And it's not just the US, it's not just any one place. That I would say, because the majority of um, countries have been colonized, maybe not the majority, I don't know if that's an accurate number, don't come for me, but like, because a lot of countries have been colonized, these systems are also have also made their way into those societies as well. And
Mhm.
so um, it's all very insidious, that it's no one necessarily feels responsible for creating this system of white supremacy, which means that a lot of times no one feels responsible for fixing it, but it's perpetuated in all those little things and what we teach our kids, in the ways that women in a workplace are asked to like take notes or make coffee more than men are, and different things like that that really communicate, this is what your role is, and we're always going to be policing you and correcting you to make sure that you stay in that lane, that you stay in that
Mhm.
role. And when I talk about the system of gender, it's a system that is perpetuated. And when you think about like what happens if someone breaks the rules, or what happens if someone doesn't go along with what the system is saying. And unfortunately, as trans and gender nonconforming folks, we know that the answer to that all too well, what happens when you break those rules.
Mhm.
And so it's those rules are perpetuated not only through socialization but also through violence, um, and that's the system of gender that doesn't have, to me, it it's kind of like if every person recycled all their plastic, we would still have climate change. Like if every person was like, I'm going to stop shaving my legs, I'm going to be vulnerable with my girlfriend, whatever, like we would still have the system. And
Yeah.
so just um like, so wear the dresses, or lean into this thing that has been highly gendered, if you really want to, and hopefully becoming more aware of how this system is shows up in your everyday life, and especially if you have kids, or if you're an educator or someone who works with young people, because once you become aware of, the different ways that you talk to girls versus boys, like you just start to notice all these different things, and it becomes obvious that it's really everywhere.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like a lot to chew on. And yeah, because like I mean, what you're talking about here is, societal expectations and societal behaviors. And a lot of that is baked into our perceptions of gender. So I mean, like I said, it's not about like wearing dresses or shaving your legs or whatever. It's about how people are treated and perceived in oral societies. So I mean, that's definitely something that's I think a lot of people could stand to be more aware of and maybe be more educated on. So because I think it'd be hard pressed to find someone who would like denies that this system exists. Although a lot of people kind of have bought into it, where it's like, especially if they benefit from the system. So
Yeah.
and we kind of need those people in privileged positions in order to stand up and say, well, hey, the system is, even though I benefit from this system is unfair. Now, how would you say that system of gender harms those with privileges in the system?
Yeah. Yeah, that's always the important part, is for the privileged folks to use their privilege to further the conversation, and enact change, hopefully. But the system of gender, I think, is unique because when you think of the system of race, like in obviously this is dependent on the context and the culture that you're in. Race shows up in different ways in different countries and different societies, but in the US, in the system of race, white people are on top. And so there is harm that white people experience. I think there's a real denial of that true inner self. But outside of that, it's hard to quantify how white people are harmed in that system because white people are on top. But in the system of gender, because it's a binary, it's like for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And so for every time that a woman is harmed, or reprimanded or whatever for being too emotional, a man is harmed or reprimanded for being too emotional. And they may have different there may be different expectations for each side, but on both ends, that women aren't supposed to be, and of course I'm saying women and men, but cisgender women and cisgender men under the system. But women are supposed to be sexual but not too sexual,
Mm,
and men are supposed to be hypersexual. And how does it harm men to be expected to be hypersexual? It means that some folks might attempt to fulfill that and become hypersexual,
mhm,
and maybe not always be pursuing that in an ethical way, or in a safe way. Um, or if a man is asexual and he feels like he's supposed to be hypersexual, then he might have a hard time reconciling his actual identity with what's been imposed on him. Um, we could talk all day about the emotional harms, just when you don't have the language to express your emotions, going back to what we were saying about language, like it's so crucial to have the language to express your emotions so that
mhm,
um, those emotions can be expressed and not just suppressed. And there's a study, or there's a few studies that basically say that, like, girls are better at reading and better with emotions, and boys are better at like math and science, and those harder, quote unquote, hard sciences are hard
sure,
topics.
sure.
um my theory, my very loose theory that I have no necessarily scientific backing on, is that the reason why girls are better with language and with emotions, um, is because there are other studies that show that, well, I guess it is kind of scientific, but there's some other studies that show that people talk to boy babies less. They say fewer words to boy babies than
Mm,
they do to girl babies. And this is, and then there's another study that basically says like people treat babies differently based off of their perception of them. So then if say a girl baby is bald, and like in Black culture in the US, it's kind of a big deal to like get your baby girl's ears pierced, because God forbid anybody thinks that she's a boy, I guess. I don't know. But so if your baby is bald and doesn't have their ears pierced, and they're wearing, say, a green shirt, and someone perceives them to be a boy, they're going to use fewer words. They're going to use fewer like emotional based words, or like empathy connection based words. They're going to be more action based words. And to me, it only makes sense that if you're talking to a 1-year-old and you're only using these action based words, and you're not using emotion based words, that by the time they're 5 or 10 years old, then there's going to be a real gap in their language compared to a girl's language who was raised with emotional and empathetic, related words to help not only describe their emotions, but also connect to other people. And so, there's a lot of things I think that people assume are human nature, that it's really socialization. And what ends up happening, there's this whole group of people that are really concerned about just men's inability to connect with other people, whether it's like men or women are less likely to date men who are who express like traditional values, quote unquote, or like that men are less likely to go to therapy, or that the self-harm rates are different for men, or whatever it is. Like there's all these people who are so concerned with, why are men struggling in these ways? Men are lonely, men don't have friends, men aren't, emotionally connecting with people. And a lot of that, I think, this is my opinion, goes back to the ways that we connect with not just babies and small kids, but with humans throughout the lifespan. And that starts honestly before they're even born. Especially now with like gender reveal parties and stuff, that starts before they're born. And so that's just the gap between whether it's men have more orgasms, and men spend more time on leisure after their baby is born, or whatever. Like all those things, I think, can be traced back to the ways in which we speak to and interact with and socialize babies and children. And so it ends up harming cisgender men, because there are a lot of folks, I mean, a lot of things I was just saying, that they don't have friends, they don't have emotional outlets, they don't have the ability to process and articulate their emotions, and they're less likely to seek therapy and all these different things. But then also, even if they do try to go against the grain, everyone in society, including your romantic partner, including your friends, are going to try to push you back into that box. Oh, why are you going to therapy? Oh, I don't like to see, my boyfriend cry, or whatever the case is. That they're even more heavily policed. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to compare. That's probably not fair, but they are very heavily policed to not deviate from what is seen as manhood and masculinity. Whereas cisgender women, I feel like it's kind of like how lesbians are acceptable, but gay men are gross. Like somehow women get, like, it's still oppression, it's still, that policing, but it's a little bit softer, and there's a little bit more allowance for them, because being a woman is already like, well, you're not a man, so I mean, what could it hurt?
Yeah,
And
I mean, there's a great deal of infantilization that goes on with, people who are assigned female at birth, whether you're
absolutely,
cisgender or, even if you're transmasculine, there's a lot of infantilization that goes on.
it's really gross. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I haven't fully fleshed that thought out, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right with the infantilization. Um, yeah, maybe it's like, oh, well, they don't know any better, they're just having fun, or
Mhm.
I don't know, whatever that is. But
Yeah,
cis
it just
men
like
have a,
if you're perceived as a woman, you're seen as less capable of making your own decisions, is kind of
yeah,
insidious
yeah.
thought that goes on there.
Right, which, yeah, I could talk about how that shows up in a lot of different systems in society
Mhm.
also. But that's a whole rabbit hole, so I won't go down that one.
Yeah. No, but that's really interesting that you brought up the study with how, like babies who are assigned male at birth or female at birth, how they're treated differently. Because my like, conspiracy theory is it started a little bit later than that, but in terms of like how certain skills or certain behaviors are reinforced at a very, very young age. So
Yeah.
you cited a study that's like, well, boys are better at math and girls are better at language and stuff. Well, is that because they're intrinsically better, or is it because like boys are rewarded more for being good at math, or they are
Right.
not rewarded as much for being good at language or whatnot? So
Yeah.
it's a lot of that is just societal. And like, I'm an economist, so like the thing that we like to say all the time is that people respond to incentives. So of course you're going to
Absolutely.
develop skills that you're incentivized to develop. So, it's us, we want to create like a new society. It's up to us to, design our incentives better than how they are
Yeah.
currently.
Yeah. And I think that one of the hardest things is for so many of us, those incentives are even like it's so, oh, what's the word? It's just it's subconscious, I think, almost at this point.
Mhm.
Like I've worked with kids a lot since I've been working for the past 15 years or so. I had one job where I was like a photographer's assistant with like kids playing sports. So the
Mhm.
like baseball pics where you're like very highly posed. So I was like I would help the kids pose, and I noticed that like, and I think I was like in college at this point, so maybe like 22. But I noticed how I would talk differently to the boys, and I would say like buddy, like, hey buddy, come over here. Or I would like
Yeah.
say certain words, and like I don't remember what I would say to the girls, but it was different. I just realized, and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm queer. I'm
Honestly,
like,
like if I think about it, I do the exact same thing with like,
yeah,
if it's like a little boy, I'll be like, hey buddy, hey kiddo, hey sport. And if it's a
yeah,
little girl, it's like, hey sweetie,
yep,
hi sweetie, or
yep.
hi munchkin.
Yeah, right. And it's just like when I realized that I was like, it's everywhere. It is
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah. It's so deeply ingrained into our society that it's very difficult to unlearn.
Yeah. And like I always tell people what radicalized me around gender was working at Toys R Us. Like literally working at the toy store. I was like, this is literally what we're teaching. We're
Yeah,
literally handing a little girl a vacuum and a kitchen
yeah.
and a baby. And we're handing a boy, a science kit or an action figure or whatever. And it's like,
Mhm.
how much more obvious can it be?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
it's from the moment we're born, we're put into that
yeah,
box, we're put into that
yeah,
role that society expects us to play. So that's, boy, that's
yeah,
that's why being trans is it's quite the journey, because like, breaking out of that box is no easy feat. So
everywhere. Yeah.
uh,
And it is hard, but I think it's really cool. Like I just feel like
mhm.
the coolest art comes from queer and trans folks, the coolest like observations about life come from us because we really have to like go against the grain in so many ways.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
I saw this meme one time, and it was like talking about gender with other trans folks, and it was like two philosophers walking down the street with like the long beards or whatever, and then it was like talking about gender with cis folks, and it was like an adult and a baby. It's like, oh, that's kind of, yeah, like we just
Yeah.
have the coolest like perspectives on life, I think, that like cis folks could never. They don't have the range.
Mhm. Mhm. So I did want to loop back to another topic that we are talking about earlier. So, how would you say the system of gender intersects with the system of white supremacist capitalism?
Yeah.
It's a very,
So
very light topic.
yeah, of course, Um, so I kind of talked about it a little bit before, but like the system of the nuclear family, or the concept of the nuclear family, is very like unnatural, I would say. Humans are social creatures. We live in community. It's
Mhm.
That's a lot of cultures, maybe not everyone, but a lot of cultures, they're traditionally live in some type of community, whether it's you're in super close proximity or a little bit further out, there's some social net of,
Yeah.
how we support each other. And so like in a lot of Black cultures, for example, there would be like, so getting your hair done is like a whole thing as a kid. Like it
Oh yeah.
takes time, you got to get it braided and it has to look good. What would happen across the diaspora, like this isn't necessarily one place, but like all the people braiding the hair and all the kids getting their hair braided, they'd all come together on like one porch or like one person's house, and everybody's braiding hair, and it's a social thing, and it's not
Mhm.
just me and my kid and the iPad doing hair. And do what you got to do. I'm not judging folks and iPads at all. I'm just saying that like that used to be a social thing,
Yeah.
and like, or going to the beauty shop, going to the barber
Yeah.
shop, like it's a social
Yeah.
thing to get your hair done. And like um that's harder to do when you don't live close to your chosen family or your family of origin, or you don't live close to other people
Mhm.
with kids around the same age or whatever the case is. A lot of us have fond memories of going to your grandparents' house for the summer, or going to spend time with your cousins, and or going to spend time with people, other kids your age, for extended periods of time. And like as an adult, I can look back and say, like, when my mom was dropping us off at grandma's house, like they were they were going to take a break, like they needed a break.
Yeah.
And how many parents don't have that now? And so the system wants us to have these very hyper independent nuclear families where like you don't really rely on other people, but that's not how humans are wired. And that's the best for capitalism, who wants to sell, instead of having like, if you think about like the movie Encanto, you have one big compound where everyone lives there. Instead of having that one big compound, they want you to have four separate houses with four
Yeah.
different water bills and four different electricity bills and four different, sets of needs for those houses, and four different cars, and all of that. And it's it's much more sustainable, and it's much more intergenerational. It's like being in community with folks, and being able to rely on each other. It makes a lot more space for our full humanity, instead of all of us having to work to cover rent. A lot of places are having a housing crisis right now, and if we all had a community that we felt safe in, that we could live with, in a larger house or compound or whatever, um, then that would be a lot more sustainable. Not everybody can work 40 hours a week, 12 months out of the year. Like, a lot of us have disabilities, a lot of us have chronic illnesses, mental health issues, that like sometimes you can't go to work. And the fact that you can, miss work one time or twice, or you can't afford to miss work, so you have to go to work not feeling well.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that you have to kind of balance your well-being with your ability to pay your bills, that would be a lot less, if we were able to live in communities where we could really support each other. And so that system of gender that really upholds the nuclear family, which upholds capitalism, um, it's very purposeful in order to extract labor, extract resources out of folks, and out of societies, and out of cultures. And um yeah, in my opinion, I think if we went back to living in more communal ways, then um a lot of the things that we deal with under capitalism would be lesser, I guess. Like, we would feel
Mhm.
a little bit more space to breathe, instead of kind of always feeling like we're in crisis. Maybe I'm projecting. Maybe I feel like I'm always in crisis in capitalism, but I think a lot of us are struggling right now. So
Oh yeah. I mean, you're preaching to the choir. But yeah, no, it's interesting that you bring up the system of the nuclear family, because I mean, I fully agree with you that that is not kind of like quote unquote a natural state of living. And I could be wrong about this, but I think this is something that kind of was, if not created, we're definitely was reinforced in post-war Western society, and especially with the creation of modern suburbs. So, I mean, I could turn this into a whole urban planning podcast.
Suburban sprawl, let's go.
Yeah, I could talk about urban planning for hours, but I mean, that's basically what the suburbs are designed to reinforce and uphold, is this idea of the nuclear family. And especially in the early days of building out these suburbs in the 50s and 60s, it was very much like, oh, the whites live over here and the blacks live over here.
Mhm.
So it's like, even in the post-Jim Crow era, like there was still segregation just because of like how real estate was designed and how
Yeah.
public transit was designed and how our
Yeah.
cities are designed. So but yeah, it's all interconnected. I mean, it's like
Absolutely.
the nuclear family is a gendered system, and it does feed into white supremacy, and it does feed into the whole, capitalism system. So as an economist, I have quite a lot of nuanced ideas about capitalism, and I think that most people watching this probably understand that's what we mean by capitalism is that just kind of like a general placeholder for our overall Western socioeconomic system, and not money bad.
Yeah, right.
because
Free market.
like
Yeah.
I mean, like, I'm a fan of markets for some things, but
Yeah.
for other things they don't necessarily work that well. So
Exactly.
so yeah, exactly. What would you say is the connection between the divine feminine resurgence and increasing societal harm against trans folks?
Ooh, yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about, like, I kind of put this whole divine feminine thing like in the same category as like the alpha male resurgence, I guess, and
Okay.
like incels and all that kind of stuff. And like there's just
So for those listening that might not be familiar with the term, including myself, could you maybe define what you mean by divine feminine?
yeah, so there's this, like, I don't know if it's a movement or if it's just like a lot of individual pockets of people kind of having these similar conversations, but like there's this, like, or maybe like soft life, if you've heard people talk about like soft life, like that's kind of like an intro into it, but basically this idea that like there's the divine masculine and the divine feminine, like these two sides of this divine coin, I guess. And the masculine is very much like tangible, like actions, doing, making things happen and like doing things, and the divine and like giving and providing. And it's suspiciously similar to the masculine that we're presented in
Mm.
society. And the divine feminine is all about receiving and leisure and letting people take care of you. And very much like the soft life of like, I deserve luxury and I deserve to not have to work really hard. I deserve to not have to, um, do a bunch of emotional labor for people, or I deserve
Mm.
to like, rest and have luxury and have these things that kind of denote that my life is soft, quote unquote, as opposed to a hard life.
Yeah.
And so, that's it's very big right now, and a lot of people are talking about it. But I think there's a couple of really great YouTubers who I listen to. One is Herbie Revolis, and they talk about how they did a video that was like, men want a soft life too, and y'all hate it. And it was like, it was from the perspective of Black cishet men who want to do the face masks and the self-care and drink tea on the veranda and frolic in the flowers, and like
Uh,
the people in the comments are like, again, policing their actions to, kind of force them into this masculine role. Because with the soft life, the the assumption is that we're only talking about cis women, number one, which means that, like, again, because this is a binary, there's an equal and opposite reaction. That's where the alpha male comes in, of like, I'm the provider for this household, I'm the leader, I'm the person who's going to guide my family, and then my wife or my partner can lay back and luxuriate because I have everything controlled. And so in a lot of these conversations, especially in the Black community, it's about cis women want a cis man who is responsible, who is thoughtful, who is forward or future thinking and has critical thinking skills, which, that's honestly not a very high bar, but unfortunately, like, people are still tripping over it. And so, like, a lot of cis women are like, I'm tired of having to be quote unquote masculine, which
Mm.
when they say masculine, it's like, I'm tired of having to like be hard, and have to do all these things for myself. I want these things that being a cisgender feminine woman that were promised to me. And so if it's kind of a doubling down on like, let me be this, this feminine cisgender woman and fit into this box so perfectly that I have to receive my reward, which is a cisgender man who's capable of not only taking care of himself, but leading a household, which is, those folks are few and far between. And so, this idea of like, I'm going to live my soft life, but like a cis man can't live his soft life because then that means someone else has to pick up the slack for him. It's a very imbalanced, I think, right. And I think to kind of add nuance to the conversation, there's a lot of conversation happening around like unbalanced work in the household when it comes to like not only cleaning and household maintenance, but also child rearing, emotional labor, and all these things. And so there's a lot of cis women who are like, I'm tired of being the only parent in the household, or I'm tired of my husband expecting me to clean up after him or expecting me to parent him or whatever the case is. And so it's this idea of like, I want to find a man who is so capable and competent that I don't have to overcompensate. But then it ends up being that like, I want my partner to overcompensate so that I can rest. And it never ends up becoming quite balanced. So that's the divine feminine think life kind of in a nutshell. And I think the connection between that and harm against trans folks, I think the divine feminine soft life, alpha male, all of that is a response to us asserting ourselves and being more visible and living our lives and being more in media and forcing societal shifts, because with any movement there's going to be a backlash. So you have Black Lives Matter and then you have All Lives Matter. Like there's going to be some kind of backlash from the people who feel some type of way about their way of life being questioned. And so I think this is the response to that, to people, more people being trans and gender nonconforming, people coming out at younger and younger ages, kids in elementary school, like changing their names and pronouns. And like, a lot of people see it as, everything is like, everything's just so different, or everything is like confusing now. And they get angry or frustrated because they're confused that like, how did we get here? And like, all these things. It feels like when you're not in the community, it feels like all this stuff just happened out of nowhere. And so they're like, whatever happened to traditional values, quote unquote, which that's that one, I try not to use traditional when talking about things that are normalized in white supremacy, because it's not necessarily traditional. Like gender reveals are only 10 years old or so. Pink for girl babies and blue for boy babies is only 100 years old. Like all that stuff is very relative. Like you can call it traditional, but it may or may not be traditional. There's plenty of practices that we've done way longer than the practices we've done here. And so, but this idea that like, where are all the traditional values, or whatever happened to, raising a boy to be a boy and a girl to be a girl. And like, I always think about like there's a show in the 70s called All in the Family, and their theme song was like, we miss the good old days. And it was like when girls were girls and men were men. Like they were saying that in the 70s, when what were we doing in the 70s? We were protesting, we were asserting ourselves, we were asserting our rights and our needs. And when that happens, conservative folks and people who for whatever reason really like the system of gender, or at least tolerate it, they push back. And so I think the pushback is hyper femininity, hyper masculinity. And having these traditional gendered nuclear families as a double down from like, how dare you assert yourselves? How dare you be visible? How dare you change society? Because it's one thing for y'all to be over there, having your little pride parade, but now the kids are at the pride parade, and now they're talking about it at school, and how dare you infiltrate the way that we're raising our children? How dare you have drag queen story hours and these things that like, it's all very like pearl clutching. I just keep like doing this because I'm like clutching my pearls as
Yeah.
an imaginary conservative, but like, how dare you do these things when like, back in my day, you were a girl and you were happy about it, or, whatever. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's
And the
a
whole like
very
think of the
obvious.
children argument. I mean, that's been used for
Yeah.
decades now.
What
So
about the children? Yeah,
yeah, just think of the
exactly.
children. I always think of
Exactly.
Reverend Lovejoy's wife from The Simpsons.
Yeah, yeah, exactly that. What about the children? Like it's never
Children.
about the children, Karen. It is never about the children. So yeah, it's fascinating to me, and I don't see too many people talking about it, but I don't think it's a coincidence that has kind of happened over the past couple of years, while at the same
Mhm.
time so much of culture is being taken, or maybe not taken, but copied or whatever from trans folks. I'm thinking about like makeup culture has like exploded over the last 10 years. And a lot of that was trans folks and drag queens who were on the internet creating tutorials for other trans folks and drag queens.
Yeah.
And like, so there's this simultaneous like, we're going to push back against your existence, but we're also going to take your aesthetic because you're doing femme better than we do femme. And we wanna have a little bit of what you have. So
Yeah, and it's I mean, if you think about it, the exact same thing has been done to the Black community. It's always like, well, we're going to still marginalize you, but we're going to take the aspects of your culture that we like and incorporate it into our culture.
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and
for
it's
sure.
when you're talking about like quote unquote traditional values or whatnot. I mean, like a lot of like what we think of as quote unquote traditional is not only is it an artificial construct that's hasn't really been around that long, but also it's like whose traditions.
Yeah,
Because I come
yeah,
from an immigrant background, and what I consider traditional is very different from what
yeah,
your typical white person might consider to be traditional. So again, it's like there's this there's this implied bias that's the kind of like the white cis heteronormative viewpoint is the default
yeah,
when the world is full of so many different people. Like there's so many different cultures and traditions out there that like you can't just homogenize it into one.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And yeah, it's like how, non-binary kind of defaults to mask, or like androgynous, maybe more than non-binary,
Mhm.
androgynous kind of defaults to mask, where like when you try to combine a bunch of different things together, if you're not really critical about it and intentional about it, then it just ends up defaulting to whatever was the majority before. That's the whole melting pot idea, but it ends
Mhm.
up just defaulting to white, like you were saying,
Yeah.
and white American at that. So it's yeah, what does traditional mean? And then too, like it can even depend on household to household. Like, you could have like, say we're cousins and my mom and your mom are sisters, but like my mom's the conservative one and your mom's the more, casual one who's
Yeah.
the cool mom or whatever. Like they were raised by the same person or people, in theory. Um, and that can change from household to household. So my mom says it's a tradition to wear a dress to church, and your mom's like, no, you can wear whatever you want. And I'm like, wait, you said it was a tradition. And I feel like that happens a lot too, that like people will say it's a tradition, or they'll say they'll like make it seem more important than it actually is, or more symbolic than it actually is. And it's like, no, you just decided to do this one day and you've been doing it so long that you assign meaning to it, but you can assign meaning to anything.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, that's probably how every tradition started at some point. It's just one person just decided to do the thing, and a lot of people, other people started doing it too.
Yep. Like, I'm
So
just
it's
gonna
really,
decorate the tree outside my house. Oh, that's cool. I want to do it too. And then next thing you know, we
yeah,
got trees inside our houses. So yeah.
yes. And like, I mean, a lot of traditions, there's a lot of, positives about them, but like, you run into problems when you stick to the tradition for its own sake, and then it starts being harmful and you're not able to let it go.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Yeah, we've
mhm.
always done it this way. Is like if you're ever working like, organizational psychology or whatever, like we've
Mhm.
always done it this way. It's such a roadblock to progress.
Yeah, yeah,
And it
exactly.
shuts down a lot of conversation. And you know, there's this idea, oh, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But also it might not be broke, but it might not have all the functionality of, something else that can
Yeah,
address people's needs better.
yeah, and it might be something that works for some people and not others. And
Yeah.
and a lot of the times the person in charge of fixing it is the one that it works for. So
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. Or yeah, they're the only one who knows how to use it in the first place. And then, what are you talking about? It's working fine.
it works on my machine.
Yeah,
What are you talking?
I don't know. It must be a you thing.
That's like a joke that I use with my friends sometimes. Anytime someone says like something doesn't work, they're like, it works on my machine.
I don't know. It must be you. I don't know. I'll tell you. Yeah, yeah,
Uh, what is our so for trans and gender expansive folks, so what
yeah.
is our job as vanguards of this movement against regressive gender roles?
Hmm. Yeah. I think for us, I think so. It's kind of hard because I think on one hand we don't owe anyone education. Like you don't have to educate people, and I think a lot of us are in a unique position to, if we choose to, whether it's educate people, share resources, start conversations. Like it doesn't have to be, educating in the way that we think of. Like I have to sit you down and walk you through this. Sometimes just challenging something that someone assumes, that can be education. And it doesn't have to, and like please don't do anything if you don't feel safe. Don't challenge people if you don't feel safe, or don't feel like you have to um put yourself on the line to defend anyone. Like always make sure that you're safe first. But
Mm,
if a friend, like one time I had a friend who, like, I use like a men's wallet, like a, I don't know, a trifold wallet. And like my friend was like, we were going somewhere and I pulled out my wallet and she was like, why do you use a wallet instead of a wallet? And I didn't even have to say anything then because I was like, I think you just figured it out. But just, things like that, just like our existence is like pushing back against the things that people can assume. And um yeah, like I think that there's space to be, um if you choose to kind of push back against what people assume about gender, about themselves, about each other. Because I, like, one thing I hate, I think this is a very non-binary thing to say, but I hate the idea that like somebody can look at me and automatically put me in a bunch of different categories and like
mm,
try to predict how I'm going to behave or how I'm going to show up in a space based off of what they can see. Like I really hate that. Like I really, like,
mm,
one of my friends, one of our like things is like, I don't want to be perceived. Like I don't want you to perceive me at all. Like
uh,
I
just
just
be
want to
invisible.
like exist. And like I don't want to be subject to like how you feel about my existence. And
Mhm.
so like I kind of lost my point. I have ADHD. It'll come back. But like as much as I don't want to be perceived, and as much as I like want to just like exist in whatever ways I want to exist without the commentary, like
Mhm.
just knowing that my existence even creates commentary and my appearance creates commentary, like that I think will move the needle. And I'm, again, don't sacrifice yourself, don't put yourself in harm's way. But I think, um, as someone who's gender expansive, I see it as like, how can I remind people that this system is fake? And maybe not
Mm.
like purposefully, maybe not every day that I leave the house, But like, if I'm going to be around a group of people, like a group of cisgender people, like it's kind of like, how can I make sure I look really gay? Because I don't want anybody to think that I'm like cisgender, like all of y'all. Like, how can I make sure I look really queer? How can I make sure I like am pushing back against, um, what's expected of me in this space? How can I make sure that I am, I don't know, representing that non-binary people exist and that
Yeah.
we can come to be, we can be in these spaces too. Um, and even if I'm the only person who looks visibly queer, visibly non-binary, like, maybe there's somebody else in that room that could use the visual of a non-binary person in the space, who is, still in their little egg and trying to figure everything out. I think about that a lot. That like, so yeah, it's not just like, I guess, educating cis people. And I don't know, it's not educating, but maybe just like popping their cisgender bubble a little bit.
Yeah.
But then also like being visible for the queer and trans kids that are coming up and need to see that there are adults who exist and who are happy and in different types of relationships, and are parents and are not parents and are traveling and are doing whatever else. And I think like, I don't want to get into the kind of choice feminism lane of like, whatever you do is feminist, like whatever you do is enough, because I think that can really excuse a lot of harm, especially like if folks are doing things that are harmful to the trans community as a whole, but they're, oh, they're a trans person, so it's okay. And it's like, no, that's not okay. Like, I mean, I'm glad that this trans person is, successful, I guess, but like on our backs. And so like, I'm not saying that at all, but just like, we always have an opportunity to like represent when we feel safe, to represent, that queer and trans people can exist here, wherever that is, whether it's, school, work, sports, whatever.
Mhm.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's you definitely bring up a lot of interesting points, but when you say about having to educate people, or even just like being perceived in a certain way, and it can be exhausting to like not only be the person that like has to educate everyone about gender or gender identity, but also like having to manage other people's perceptions of you. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes you just want to go to the grocery store and get a carton of milk and
Yeah.
not have to think about these things, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, it's I had another thing in my head, but again, ADHD brain, but the old undiagnosed ADHD brain.
I understand. I can relate very heavily to that.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I had it and now it's gone.
Yep. It happens all the time.
But yeah, no, it's because there was one anecdote that I did want to bring up, is like, just so I went to my first Pride recently. Well, my first Pride since coming out anyway.
Okay.
And just being in an environment among other trans people and other gender diverse people and other queer people, and just being around people where I don't have to, explain myself or manage other people's expectations of me, or I can just like relax and be myself. And that was a very, very freeing experience. And the other thing, I remember the thing I was gonna bring up earlier.
Good job.
So I think this is not exclusive to gender diverse folk. I think this holds true for any marginalized group, but just when you're seen in public, there's that expectation on you that you have to act as the representative of your group. And that also is extremely exhausting. Like, you can't locally, I'm like the trans person in our group. And so I have to be the shining example for the trans community. But like, sometimes I just want to be weird and gross.
Exactly.
And I assume, like everyone, like you, whether you're a person of color, whether you're a religious minority, whether you're a gender or sexual minority, everyone has gone through that at some point. I'm sure you have experiences of that as well.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to have those spaces where you can just like relax and just like I don't have to
Mhm.
explain myself. I can be gross or I can be weird or I can
Yeah.
stim or I can whatever. And like those are so important. And I think for me, I'm in a place in my life where like all my friends are queer, non-binary, trans. All of my friends are like, I don't, I'm not in too many spaces where I feel other. So then when I am in those spaces, I have the spoons to be able to like, okay, I'm gonna put
Mhm.
on my most non-binary outfit and like if people have questions, I'm gonna handle it. But like if I was isolated, if I was in a place where I was the trans person, I didn't have any trans friends, like accessible to me or whatever else, like yeah, that's a completely like it's easy to say that when it's like I only have to interact with cis people once a month versus like I have to go to school every day with these people, like that's a whole
Yeah.
different a whole different thing. So no, completely understand. And like I don't think it's sometimes our job is to survive, depending on where
Mhm.
you are in your life. Sometimes your job is to survive, sometimes your job is to take care of yourself, and sometimes that means
Yeah.
going people still say stealth, but like being stealth. Like sometimes it means just like, throwing on the hoodie and just getting the milk. And I'm not doing all
Yeah.
this today. And like I want to honor that too, because that's, our survival
Mhm.
is resistance. And sometimes you're in some spaces where like that's all you can ask of yourself. And like that's okay. Like, you know what, I gotta make it until I graduate next May. Like that was me. Like if you would have talked to me at 16, like I have a year, 8 months, and 14 days, like I was there. So please know that, that is real and that is valid. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think it's just that just makes it even more important to find your community. And even if they're not all queer and trans people, or they're not all exactly the same identities, that you still feel like you can be your full self and you don't have to be the shining example. You don't have to answer
Mhm.
ignorant questions or, whatever else, that you can just like be yourself. Whether that's in person, online, like we all need that.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. And yeah, like you said, sometimes just take your job is just to take care of yourself and live your life. I mean, like
Yeah.
I adore all my activist friends and people I look up to, and I think they are doing wonderful work. But for some of us, like the way we fight back is just by living our lives.
Yeah.
So, and that's all we can do, and that's very valid. And I think it's really important that that we're seen just living our lives. Um,
And I think for me, and I feel like I've heard this from other folks too, but like sometimes there was like a guilt of like, oh, I should be on the front lines, or I should
mm,
be, out fighting, or I should be doing something to like, improve our quality of life as queer and trans folks. But
yeah.
for me, I didn't know this at the time, but like now I know that I'm neurodivergent, that like the last place I need to be is in a march in, the middle of the street with 500 people and there's no order and it's kind of chaotic and loud. Like that is
Mhm.
not where I'm needed. And like everybody has their role. And maybe your role is to cook the food for the people who are on the front lines, or to raise
Mhm.
the money, or to give people a ride, or to organize the crowdfunding, or whatever it is. Like we all have our gift and we all have our thing that we do. And like,
Yeah.
we're not all like the front lines of the march or like at Pride. Those are the things that get the most like pictures and get the most coverage. But it like there's so many roles and there's so many, like maybe
Mhm.
you're the child care person so that other people can go out, or maybe you're the person that builds a website, like whatever it is. Like we all have our role, and like you might be in a survival space right now, and like that's okay. And like I hope that you have some people that can hold you in that space. But like we can also learn about, as we're in the survival space, like what is my gift? Maybe I'm the artist that documents the moment. I think people sleep on artists way too much. Like the artists are the ones who, Nina Simone said, artists reflect the times that they're living in. Like that's the
Oh,
job.
100%.
And so like maybe you're gonna write songs about the movement and you're gonna document this moment. And like
Mhm.
don't feel bad that you can't show up in this way that you see other people showing up, or that you feel like you need to look a certain way, or you need your activism or your organizing to look a certain way. Like no, like we need you to be you, because I can't do what you do, you can't do what I do, and we all have our own, individual roles, and like,
Yeah.
and we need you here. If anybody's like questioning it, like, we need you here. We need your brilliance and your light. We need that in the world. So
Yeah.
hang
Yeah.
in there.
Exactly. Yeah. No. When you said, that people who experience guilt for like not, giving enough, that really reminded me of a specific. Oh my God, I can't talk. Specific person that I know, who is, an activist, but lately has been taking some time to, take care of some personal stuff in her life, and I started feeling guilty for like not, advocating for certain causes, and I just want to shake her and be like, don't apologize for living your life. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, you could give every last drop of blood and it's still like wouldn't be enough. So like
No.
live your life. Like
Yeah.
no one expects you to give everything to the cause. Like save
Yeah.
some for yourself. It's okay to be selfish.
Yeah. And to bring it back to capitalism, like, capitalism wants us to work 24/7. They want us to think we're not enough. They want us to think that, we have to sacrifice our health and our livelihood for the movement. They want
Mhm.
us to use our energy all up, and just not have anything left to actually live our lives. Like, it is resistance to take care of ourselves. Audre Lorde, self-care is not indulgence, it is resistance. Self-care is not selfish, it is resistance. And
Mhm.
having nice things, or going on vacation or whatever, like, if those things nurture you, if those things nourish you, then like, do what you got to do to nourish yourself, because we deserve that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not, nobody should have to work all the time, especially the people who have already been working all the time.
Mhm. Yeah. And especially people who already give like 200%. It's okay. Take a break sometimes. Take care of
Yeah,
yourself.
because if
I
you
really
don't,
hope
your
she's
body's
listening because,
hint hint.
but yes, you have my blessing. Take care of yourself. Do whatever you need to do. You don't have to do
Yeah,
everything.
because like, if you don't slow down, your body will do it for you, and it won't be pretty. So
Mhm, mhm.
there's so many people, especially queer and trans folks, who, the after 15, 20 years of like doing unsustainable levels of work, that you just like crash
Oh, yeah.
and have a lot of health issues. So please take care of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. A lesson I learned very young, at a very young age was always take care of yourself because no one else is going to do it for you.
Nope.
Yeah. All right. Now, is there anything that we missed about the system of gender that you'd like to make sure that you said?
I think the only thing I can think of is I just want to emphasize community again, of just like taking care of each other, taking care of the people that are in your chosen family, or your friends, taking care of each other, and like being able to rely on each other in an emergency, or if something were to happen. Like, that's so crucial, because especially for queer and trans folks, like, we can't always rely on our families of origin. We can't always rely on the people that society wants or expects you to rely on. So it's really important to, like, who's your emergency contact, or like, if something were to happen and you had to leave your house all of a sudden, like, do you have somewhere to go? And like, if you don't, not to shame you, but just to, think about that, and then kind of prioritize building community, and maybe having some conversations with some friends, like, I really value our friendship, and I really care about you, and I would love for us to have, to be in each other's communities, whatever that may mean. Um, but, the system, I think I always tell people, like, yeah, you can burn it down, but like, if there's nothing left after that's burned down, then like, we're all just kind of flailing. So we have to be
Yeah.
building what we do want. We have to be building the world we do want to see, as we're challenging and changing and breaking down and burning down different parts of the system that already exists. So always be thinking about, how can you live in a more community minded way, even if it's just like, I need a screwdriver. Instead of going to buy one at the store, I'm going to borrow one from my neighbor, or, whatever it is. Just like, even the smallest things, they kind of strengthen that muscle.
Mhm. So we talked about this earlier on in the show with your whole experience with playing with your clothing. Can you maybe
Yeah.
share another experience that you've had with gender euphoria?
Ooh, gender euphoria. Um, oh, so I used to work in education, specifically like higher education colleges. And like when you do a job interview at a university, like it's a whole thing. Like you're expected to wear like a suit basically. And
Mm,
so I decided um that I was gonna get a men's suit. And so like I went to the suit store and I like, I got fitted and like it
nice.
was all very like I felt very dapper. It was great. It was like the experience of like getting it fitted and trying on the different suits and then actually like getting the suit and it fit me and it was all color coordinated. That was pretty nice. Um yeah, that's another experience of gender euphoria. Definitely just like having that uh attention of like they really wanted me to like find a suit that fit my body and all those different
Mhm.
things. So that was a really great experience.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate to that. I mean, I've been fitted for suits more than once, and just the whole like experience of getting like clothes tailored for you
Yeah.
is really fun. I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's a suit or it's a dress or something else, but it's clothes that are specifically made for you. Um,
Yeah.
and it yeah, absolutely. It feels really nice.
Yeah. It's really cool.
Yeah. What would you like to make sure that folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary trans and or gender diverse issues?
Um, just that it feels hard being someone who goes against the grain of society because it is hard because gender is the foundation of all the isms and um, all the ways that our societies are the way that they are, and so that there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with doing things differently. It's the system. It's the everything. It's the air around us, and that you being your true self, your full self, allows so many other people to see that it's possible to be your full self. That it's possible to be um, happy, joyful, um, at peace, being your full self, and it's important that um, we show that there's an alternative to this like conveyor belt that we're kind of pushed on. That a lot of people feel like there's not much of a choice, or maybe they don't question their choice and they just kind of go along the conveyor belt. And like we're brave enough to jump off, or run backwards, or lay down on it, or whatever
Yeah.
to to question it and to push back against it. And I think that we have a really important role in society, that we are here to remind people that there's more to life than what it currently exists. And I think that that's a really important and beautiful role. So yeah, I'm glad y'all exist. I'm glad we exist as a community, and I'm glad we're having these conversations.
Yeah, me too. So once again, I want to thank you for coming on the show. So Khye Tyson, they them pronouns, is an unapologetic Southern career Black femme who enjoys yoga, building community, laughing, subverting the gender binary, and reminding people that they can fire their doctors. Khye is a sacred transition guide, entrepreneur, healer, consultant, and educator working towards a world in which Black women and femmes can live, thrive, and raise healthy families freely within a healthy community. You can get a whole bunch of links in the chat. Also, if you're watching this in the future, you can find all the links in the down below section. I'm pointing, but you can't see me. If you're just listening, you can't see me. So we're going to end up with this week's Clouder query that you, our audience, can answer on our social media platforms.
The question is, imagine we eradicated the harmful system of gender that exists in many societies. What would your ideal world look like, and how would it be different?
So next week, our guest will be Anna, they, she pronouns, and we'll be discussing disability and gender. So thanks everyone for listening today. and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And we'll catch you all next time.
Genderful would like to thank our guest for being on this podcast. If you'd like to catch us live, join us on Mondays at twitch.tv/gendermeowster. Show notes will appear in the edited version of the show on Fridays on both YouTube and podcasting platforms.
If you have a question you would like the host to answer, or are gender diverse and would like to request an interview, please send an email to genderfulpodcast@gmail.com or sign up via the website at genderfulpodcast.com.
As a gender diverse community, the Clatter wants to assure our listeners that we are prepared to moderate our spaces. We will get positive and negative feedback on these shows and topics, and we have a moderation team on our channels, socials, and Discord server ready to deal with this.
Please join our Discord server at discord.gg/meowster to meet the community and get a regular digest of solidarity resources. You can also support us with subscriptions on Patreon, following and reviewing us on your favorite podcasting platform, or engaging with our posts and content on social media at GenderfulPod and at GenderMeowster.
You could take a few moments to also rate the show. We will post any 5-star reviews on our socials, so get creative. Mention a special interest of your own, a project you're working on, or even say hi to your comfort person in your review. What power!
This show is made possible by volunteers, tips, and subscriptions. Shout out to the folks helping us coordinate guests, edit the podcast, moderate the live chat, and post on our socials.
Artist credit for Genderful. Genderful's theme song is called Hope by Free Range Megs, aka Soma. The Gender Meowster logo was designed by That's Barnaby and edited with consent by Transgriffin. Genderful's pre-show is wrangled by JuiceTex. Genderful is edited and mixed by Transgriffin and Alexis Vandam. Genderful's social media is managed by Queer to Help. Genderful is hosted by Atlas O Phoenix and Gender Meowster. Genderful is the intellectual property of Gender Meowster. All rights reserved.
Trans rights are human rights. That's right.